Welcome everyone to today's Logistics Business webinar, Adaptive Fulfillment in Action, Automation for Tomorrow. It's brought to you today in association with Locus Robotics. Now, across the supply chain sector, warehouses are under increasing pressure. Customers expect faster delivery. Labor remains challenging, we know that in many markets, and order profiles are becoming ever more complex, and businesses need to scale, of course, without sacrificing flexibility. Automation is often presented as the answer, but what does successful automation actually look like in practice? So today we're going to bring together three different perspectives. We'll hear from the technology provider, we're going to hear from a supply chain consultant, and we're going to hear from a logistics operator responsible for delivering results day after day in a demanding fashion environment. The tech provider is Kane Edwards. He's the business development manager at Locus Robotics. Hello, Kane, and welcome to the webinar.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for inviting us. Looking forward to this session.
It's a great pleasure. The supply chain consultant is John Bruin. He's principal consultant at MyBack. Hi, John. Thanks for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
And the logistics provider is Steve Hicks, commercial director at Noatum Logistics. Hello, Steve. It's great to have you on the show.
Great to be here, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you, Peter.
It's a great pleasure. As we wait for the last few guests to log in and join us, I'll give you a really quick overview of what we'll be talking about over the next 40 minutes or so. We hope to explore what makes fulfillment operations truly adaptable, where automation delivers the greatest value, what lessons have been learned from real-world deployments, and how businesses can prepare for the next generation of warehouse operations. And if you still want to know more, then we encourage you to ask our panel of experts a question using the Q&A function of this webinar host, and we'll do our very best to get it answered during the session, and if not, we'll come back to you afterwards. Right, so thank you to our audience for joining us. Let's get started. So I'm going to pitch this opener to you, John. When you hear the phrase adaptive fulfillment, what does it mean to you, and why do you think it's become such an important topic over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, I think adaptive, flexible, reactive, there's a lot of words that we could describe it. There's been a world of, let's call it, fixed automation that's given a hell of a lot of benefits over the years to end users. I think there's been a big shift in focus to solutions that can actually flex to people's operations, supply chain disruption, changes in customers, changes in behaviors. So I think it's being able to do exactly that, being able to adapt, rather than just putting in a solution that is, fit for the next 5 or 10 years and you leave it alone. So I think that's been a big change, at least in the way that we approach things in recent times.
And Steve, as effectively in this, for the sake of our webinar today, you are the customer. How is automation playing a part in the fashion logistics? It's a very specific challenges around apparel. We talk about adaptive as being something very specific for you. So and something that's effectively evolving. Where are you on the automation journey in your business?
Well, we probably started 7+ years ago looking at automation. We looked at several different types of automation, but what was becoming clear was that the cost of labour, remaining competitive in the marketplace, the availability of labour, and the peaks that the retail industry has, it became almost essential for us to move to a more automated solution for our customers if we were ever to, remain competitive. I think everybody knows the high street is under extreme pressure and cost of running businesses. The businesses would move it more to an online model. So automation for us was the only way we could see forward.
And Kane, would you say from the sort of Locus perspective, that's a pretty typical user case? The sort of challenges of everyday business is driven the demand for automation up. Is that where you're seeing the growth?
Yeah, one of the areas, yeah, for sure, Peter. So in terms of where automation is coming from in terms of a demand point from customers, it probably started out as a labor element, and we all know that COVID and the shutdowns really escalated that in terms of the the storm in a teacup almost of not being able to get the labor on site, but also then increasing sales profiles coming through e-commerce and online. So that was kind of pulling in two directions. The Amazon effect, as we call it in the industry, I suppose, of same day, next day, and just those tightening SLAs. I think manual operations, manual pick, manual replen, just can't get the product out the door quick enough, frankly. So that's always been this is why we would need to automate. But then there's also the opportunity cost that comes in of if your competitors are doing it. So, looking at Steve in terms of that word of how to be competitive against what your clients are doing, what your competitors are doing. You almost need to do it to be able to offer the same level, if not better level of service at a lower price point, at a lower cost margin. So there's a load of different angles of why customers, it's not necessarily, hey, we've got this pain point and this challenge. It could be the opportunity enables it. And where we come in terms of that question of what's adaptive, it's not just one solution and can we scale that up or down for peak, for example. It's can we adapt to, the COVID example. You can't design against potentially every scenario. We can't predict every scenario, what a customer might want us to pick, what might happen in the world. So with automation, it's then we know how people work, we know how to get people in and how that will change. With automation, does that enable businesses to react a little bit quicker potentially to what is then being asked of them in the market in terms of use case, in terms of customer demand as well.
Now, Steve, you work in fashion, of course, fashion logistics, and that it's a sector that can be, is highly seasonal and also promotional. So your peaks are all over the place. So I guess flexibility is probably one of the things you look for, one of the key areas when you're talking about automating some of your processes.
Yeah, I mean, we need flexibility, not just for the peaks, because it's quite interesting. Everybody online, when they do their online ordering, they tend to do it Friday to Sunday at the weekends. And
guilty as charged.
We've over the years we've established that we become very busy on a Monday and Tuesday. And Kane alluded to, later pickup times. People want to order today, and they want it at their house tomorrow morning. So flexibility. Automation is there, and it's offering a 24-hour service. The automation is there 24 hours, so if you get busy one day, you can expand it into second and night shifts. It gives you the option to expand your operation very, very quickly.
Peter, apologies, I know you're asking questions, but I had a question for I guess Steve and Kane. I've been at a few events recently where we've talked about using automation flexibly in the sense of, especially in the 3PL sense, is trying to balance peaks throughout the year. So as you mentioned, fashion, big peak at Black Friday, big peak at Christmas, and then potentially a small peak in returns, after Christmas. How realistic has it been, I guess, for you, Steve, to be able to balance that across sites or across customers, or using different technologies, or is it something for the future?
No, I think it's here now. We're quite able to balance across our customers. We use Locus on 2 WMS platforms, and we're able to move the bots from one platform to another within 10-15 minutes. We can move it to another part of the warehouse, get it up, because normally it's with your customers, the Black Fridays, the seasonal peaks you can cater for because they're planned. You sit down with the customer. It's the one where the merchandising team are there. It's 1 month of the year. Perhaps it's this month. Perhaps it's June. Sales are not going too bad. They're not really happening. And someone decides on a Thursday night, right, we're going to put all these products on promotion. And Friday morning, all of a sudden, orders are flowing in, and we need to readjust the workforce within the operation. So it's the quick change that really I see as the flexibility part.
Yeah, it's a good question, John. We've got a good example of another customer actually who their peak is very much driven by the weather in clothing and accessories. And last year round, if you can think back that far, we had quite a late cold spell coming into winter. So the forecast just totally ripped up. Everyone was still in t-shirts when they should have been in the big coat. And then suddenly within the week forecast is, there's snow and there's a cold spell coming, and every man, woman, and their dog needed to go and get a woolly hat and a scarf and a big coat, and that is a very different profile to manage as it is to t-shirts and lighter clothing. So the automation needed to be able to change to handle that at short notice as well. So it's not just the scale and do we have the capacity and can we predict where that's going to be, and obviously the cost element to that of overshooting or undershooting and getting it wrong. But then there's actually just the configuration and the physical of can we handle that when it comes. So yeah, it's a challenge, and it's something that we have a commercial model which is robots as a service, which enables that scaling up and down. But I think the crucial bit here is having a partnership with your all three of us here, right? So I think your automation vendor, your customer user, your consultants, and any external partners as well needs to have full visibility and communication all the way through to make sure that when that peak does come at short notice outside of the traditional Black Friday, that it's not just okay, we've got this on hand now, but what's going to happen down the line? Can the full supply chain react at the same pace?
Yeah, I've visited one of your sites, Kane. It was the Flying Tiger Fulfilment Center for its e-commerce, and actually one of the key things that I took away from that was how your products worked alongside humans as well. The human factor in the supply chain in fulfillment is still very significant. What is the? I'm going to put this on to you, John. When you're looking to support a customer and to help them get their operations more optimized, is there an element of sort of change management when it comes to introduction of technology around the existing workforce?
I think there's probably the one end of the spectrum to the other on this one. Is the first point before you can get to the change management piece and on the automation piece is understanding your as is. So in previous roles, I've been part of this, but and customers typically will skip a few steps and they'll go and explore technology and they'll say, right, we've got some shiny robots we can put in our warehouse, let's go and do it. Let's save a few people on the way. It's totally wrong mindset potentially, but being able to create a bit of a baseline to say this is how we understand our business and what we're currently achieving and how that might adapt in the future with different scenarios or growth or different product ranges, whatever it be, that gives you such a solid foundation to say, who do I need in the business in the next 5-10 years, and who do I need to go and deliver this automation project? Because I mentioned this on a panel last week, is that there's a huge part of automation that is saving labor, but what people don't realize is that actually there is a lot of labor that goes into installing, optimizing, analyzing, and continuously improving technology. So if you don't have those people in your business, you might implement something you have no idea how to use. You bought this shiny new piece of equipment and you say, great, it's going to improve all my throughput capabilities, my storage capacity's gone through the roof, but actually I don't know how to use it. So being able to bring in the right people in the right roles to manage that, for the future is absolutely key, because your processes will be totally different to what they were before. And I think on a process point, one thing we always try and say early on is, if you have inefficient processes, you have bottlenecks that you say we're still going to have that later, but it'll be better with automation, it will not work. You want to try and make as smooth and streamlined of a process as possible to then adapt the automation around that, rather than trying to use technology and invest in something to fix your problems. So there's so much going on in the ethos of buying this bit of kit that is nothing to do with the kit itself. And I think you need to be really mindful.
I'm delighted to say we're starting to get some questions from our audience. Gentlemen, if you don't mind, if I throw this one out, and maybe this is one for Steve. Mohad is asking, which warehouse processes are currently delivering the highest ROI when automated. So I guess he's asking for where were your challenges and where have your wins been, your biggest wins?
I think our biggest wins have probably been in the actual picking process. To answer it, simple line, but coming back on John's point about having the actual overall process end to end, because when we first went into the automation, we looked at all the different types of automation, and we had people giving us 300-400 items picked per hour. But when I told them that, well, by the packing process, because they want this nice little bit of packing done in the retail industry with a little bow on it or something else, we can only do 40 an hour. 300 to 400. It's not. I'm going to create a bottleneck very, very quickly. And so, don't just focus on the bit that is you can get the biggest return on. You've got to do the whole end-to-end process from the moment someone places an order, it's picked, it's packed, it's on the back of a truck. Because if you don't do that, the benefit you made in the picking will certainly be lost in the packing process.
Right, and John, I guess that's from your perspective. You take an overall view of end to end, and advise accordingly. I mean, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, I guess, is the phrase that always comes up here.
Yeah, I mean, it's whack-a-mole, right? It's just hit one and you find a new problem that pops up, and you realise actually you'll be doing that forevermore. And I think
I was trying to use more professional phraseology than that, but I think if you pardon the pun, you've hit it right on the head there.
Yeah, professionalism is not my highest skill, I guess. I think so. I think Steve's absolutely, he's got it right there. If you don't look end to end, you'll miss something, and you'll create these bottlenecks in different places. But I think you'd be surprised at how much as well what's happening inside your warehouse will affect your wider network as well. And that doesn't have to be that you have 50 DCs across the world and they all link together. It could be that you have one site and many suppliers and many destinations. But we look a lot sort of holistically at a network level. What you do within that site in terms of automation will make a huge difference than what you would do inside your network in general. So it is incredibly broad. Obviously, I'm not saying that every time someone wants to automate a picking process, they should look at their entire network and decide what they're going to do with it. But just be mindful that it will have knock-on effects that you just need to be mindful of to make sure that you're not just moving the problem elsewhere. But the point on the picking, I mean, typically picking accounts for about 60% of your labor on site, packing 25%. So between those two pieces, that's a huge portion of what you're focusing on. So yes, it probably is likely in the spotlight when you're looking to automate something. But it's always considering that end to end.
Okay, now I've got a pair of questions here from Jash here. He's, I think the first one you've kind of answered by talking about your robots as a service. First of all, he asks, can I add temporary capacity for peak periods without long-term commitments? And the second question is, how quickly can a customer scale a robot fleet ahead of a peak season?
To your point, robots as a service model fully enables that short-term scale of capacity. So we have a minimum of a 1 month commitment for a short-term robot. That gets you through peak. And then, you just return the robot back to Locus when you're done with it. It means traditionally when you're designing automation, you have that challenge of do we design where our average looks like, or do we design for the peak up here, but then we're actually over capacity most of the year. And you're stuck in this bit of do we over undershoot it, and you almost only get it right 5 days of the year. So it's really important from all of our solutions. We've got multiple solutions, multiple robots that we can provide that ability to say, is it short term or long term? Do we need to grow and scale? And then at short notice, it's pointless offering that, but saying we need 6 months notice ahead of time. So naturally, a lot of our customers are in the 3PL or e-commerce worlds, and actually, Steve's what Black Friday comes around Christmas, and actually that's also when flu season hits. So a lot of our healthcare providers also need to scale up at that time. So the back end of the year is a very heavy time for needing increased capacity. At that point, we might want a few more weeks notice ideally. But if we know from a customer, hey, we're seeing this coming down the track, there's going to be something. We don't know exactly what it looks like yet. Then at least we can, start to work and plan. So within a few weeks' notice, we can react within days, of course. But within a few weeks' notice, we can have additional robots on site, and then very quickly. And Steve will attest to this. Once robots arrive, it's a matter of minutes to get the robot then unpacked and part of the fleet, and you've increased your capacity within 2 or 3 minutes.
Peter, just to add to that, you mentioned, Kane, about the where you design to your peak days somewhere in between your average day, wherever it'll be. I like to call it the Goldilocks zone of where you would like to automate for investment versus benefit. I think the main thing we've also seen change probably in the last maybe I'd say 5 years, since COVID. The measures that you would put in place to say, well, this is how I'm going to measure my business case is a little bit different now, as I mentioned it before. So yes, you might design for something that is a little bit higher than your peak, but that will actually, somewhere below your peak, but not necessarily the maximum. It will give you that resilience to know that if you have fluctuations, your operation isn't going to fall over. That's a bigger focus now than it was before. I don't want to spend as much money before. I want to make sure that I'm covering it, but I'm not over investing. Whereas people are seemingly over-investing because they want to have that resilience because of all the disruption we've had over the last 5 years. So it's not easy to measure, but it's definitely something the businesses are now trying to de-risk.
Steve, whenever I go into a fashion warehouse, and I'm going to say this to you today, but I could have said the same thing to you 25 years ago. I'd still see them sometimes or often struggling with returns. Can automation play a part in helping you bring those in smoothly? And of course, in fashion, you've got industry high levels of returns. So how much of a headache is it still for? Companies like yours?
I'd like to be able to sit here and say it's not a headache anymore, Peter. But I'd be lying if I was to say that. I mean, unfortunately, returns are. Yeah, I mean, they can run anywhere between 20% and 40% of everything that goes out comes back in. In fact, I always say it's the one forecast we can get right because we know what went out this month will come back next month.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, like anything, our customers always want to know why it's been returned. So there's always a human element there. Saying wrong size, wrong colour, didn't like it. So the human element is still there. It can help us with the actual physical put away, so we can actually get the robot to take the goods to the actual put away location. But no, unfortunately, I don't think it will actually be able to solve our returns process. I think that humans are actively needed in that area, unfortunately.
And the other area I see, sort of high levels of human need in a warehouse is in the actual, individual order picking. Of course, you've got the sort of, especially in your sector again, a tremendous variety of formats. Where are the big challenges there still when it comes to order picking?
I think from an order picking, I think in some ways automation has probably made order picking worse in a sense.
Right.
In the fact that the point of sales, every store wants to be replenished on a daily basis, and from a end shop customer point of view, that's really positive. But actually, it means that we're sending out perhaps smaller boxes, picking smaller volumes. But at the end of the day, if it's selling through the shops, that's a positive for the customers. So I think there's some pluses and wins. The people element. If touching on the point of people engaging, which is a really important point. When you get the peaks coming in, bringing people in, because although peaks are, we're talking about the automation and the robots here, you actually still need more people even with the peaks. So the automation and robotics has allowed us to bring people in. They follow a strict process. It's very quick to induct them, and perhaps you don't need the high level of quality and skill that you need day one from someone else doing another part of the process, like returns, where you have to make some judgments. So I think there's been some benefits and perhaps some other things that have gone against us in the warehouse.
Kane, I'm coming to you, and then I'm going to circle this around to you as well, John. We're 25 minutes into the webinar, and this is our first mention of AI, which has got to be some sort of record, hasn't it? I'm going to, we do hear a lot about AI in the warehouse, and the hype is there. But of course, we're also now seeing genuinely practical implementations of it. From a supplier's perspective to the industry, Kane, where do you see AI actually genuinely adding value today? And and where are the sort of are there areas where the industry is perhaps getting a little ahead of itself with the AI hype?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'm surprised it took this long, but it's a really interesting one, because I think with AI, you can look at it right back from what happens internally within our processes as a supplier. So does that mean that we can embed it in terms of our manufacturing and production capabilities? Does it mean that actually our customer support profiles are improved by using AI in any way, in terms of being able to identify problems before they happen and increase our kind of SLAs and performance that way? And then it's in the physical, in terms of physical AI, in terms of our robots. And that can be from the way that the robots see the world and predict and learn what might happen in terms of how people and equipment behaves, and improve performance, and in that way. There's also, for example, Locus, we've just released a new product called Locus Array, and that's robotic arm piece picking. And then there's the vision element in terms of identifying products, and then capturing dates and batch codes and God knows what, and how do we manipulate that data and link it with the automation. So I think that physical agentic, all the way through what we provide, it's fundamental that we are at the forefront of how we embed AI. I think the challenge, and actually it goes right back in terms of if I'm running a warehouse and I'm looking at, okay, I know I need to do something, I need to invest in some level of automation. I think the risk is that people feel they know, oh, I should be asking, how do you use AI? What level of AI do you have? And see all this good stuff out there, but don't necessarily know, well, what are we trying to do with that? So there's the solution and the product, but then rather than just slapping a tag on and saying, yes, we are AI native and we're fully embedded with AI in our systems, it's actually going that next level down and saying, but what, but how, but why, and then how is that being used in terms of the data collection, in terms of there's so much that goes around it, and the pace of change in terms of just technology, automation, and then AI has been so quick that I think for us as a supplier, we need to be ahead of it, and everyone working within Locus is very much looking at being AI native, to be able to then recommend the good, the bad, and the ugly to customers. So it's not just, to John's point, an ROI of, hey, if you put this automation in, it's going to save you this amount on headcount, and you're going to get your payback within 6 months or 12 months, whatever it might be. It's also then, what are some of the soft benefits? What are some of the risks? What's everything else that goes through having these systems in place? And how do we future-proof it? If you'd asked that question 2 or 3 years ago, it would have been a very different answer, and it will be probably again in another 2 or 3 years' time. I didn't know what Copilot or Claude or ChatGPT was a few years ago, and what won't we know in a few years is another question. But the demand won't stop. So I think that's the challenge, of course, is how do we stay ahead and make sure that it's safely and successfully embedded into everything that we do, so that customers can trust more than anything.
And then the twist on the question to John is, effectively, I guess the customer doesn't really need to know what type of AI, is involved. They always want to know, what does it mean for me? How can this help my business? Do you find that's the case? And also, just a supplementary question: do you have any issues around data security when you're talking about AI?
Yeah, so for the first point, we had a seminar last week around AI internally, and he said a lot of people are asking the question about which platform we're using, which AI system are you using, and he basically said it doesn't matter. It's just how can you best use it in your own use case, because ultimately, yes, they have their nuances, but they are pretty much all doing similar things. And we've done a lot of work in the last few years. We've talked a lot about physical automation in this webinar, but digital automation or anything to do with software and AI, that's a bigger use case at the moment within warehousing, logistics, wider supply chain, to be looking at how, like you just said, Peter, how specifically could AI help me to reduce time or cost in managing my inventory, or in my customer service, or in my reporting, even if it's not really logistics or supply chain focused, it's more business related. How can you make sure you're reporting, internally and having the data visibility that you'd like by using AI? So it's kind of that crossover there. So it's there's a lot more study and strategy that goes behind it rather than products, to say, how can we manage this process better by using things like AI? On the data security topic, that's also been huge for two reasons. One, there's been obviously a fair few cyber attacks over the past few years of some big retailers and big businesses. We work with a lot of kind of multinationals, and now that is an absolute prerequisite from when we do work with them, is when we handle all of this business data, whether it is transactional data from a warehouse, or whether it's operational data just from the day-to-day. That's a huge topic of how it's handled and how it's transmitted and how it's shared. And we spend a lot of time making sure that, one, we are compliant, but two, that we're actually doing it the way that we've said that we're going to do it. Because in the past it would be, we had all these agreements that we had, but just send it through an email to so and it'd be fine. Whereas that's not okay anymore, because of the huge risk that there is in cybersecurity, for example. So yeah, it's a big focus for us, both in helping customers, but also making sure that we're compliant with their internal rules and procedures.
And Steve, you're at the heart of a data-heavy industry sector. Are you seeing the benefits of AI across your operations? Are you seeing problems solved? I
was reflecting on the question you posed to Kane there, and yes, I mean, AI does play a specific part, because even though you've got like we have locust robots running around the warehouse, and people actually predicting, we work on a zonal basis with the robots, and actually how we wave the orders so that we can actually control the number of robots and people that we're using on a daily basis. Becomes a very data hungry process, really. So AI will hopefully make that even better than we are today, because a lot of it is done by humans at the moment, and it can be a little bit of a finger in the air sometimes to get it right, and some days we get it right and some days we don't.
Yeah, and good luck to you trying to get it right all the time, especially in fashion.
Yes.
Questions come in actually directly for you, Kane. If you're advising, it's regionally specific. If you were advising a Belgian logistics company or an SME starting its automation journey, what would be your first three priorities?
Good question. And I don't know necessarily if I appreciate the questions from Belgium, whether that is regional specific. I think it would be the same principle for anyone, taking out maybe any specific pressure or requirement or regulation. But I think the holistic three that I would look at is, John maybe mentioned it, John, so you mentioned it past, is process first, right? So I've spoke with a number of prospective customers who would come and say, we love this technology, and we really want the benefits that it provides, and we go in and they're here in terms of, at the minute, they don't really have a warehouse management system, and products aren't barcoded, and locations aren't particularly well labeled, and all the sort of fundamentals of warehousing. And it's almost like we're trying to take this massive leap, and just that silver bullet of automation is then going to, we've maybe held back a little bit, but it's just going to solve the problem for us. There is a fair chunk of improvement that can be made just by fundamentally getting some processes right, and maybe even sometimes we turn away interested companies initially, just to say, look, we rather than invest in this, focus on this down here, and then it means that when you do invest in that automation, you're going to get so much more out of that, rather than, to John's point, automating a bad process is never something that we'd want to advise. So that's number one. I think number two is to prioritize orchestration over just automation. So you want to look at, again, it's that whole end to end. So it's how is automating this going to play in from a material and an information flow, so that if you've got that almost going back to the old school Kaizen and value stream mapping, right? Of when do we first see an order, what happens, and then from the customer receiving, what happens there. At that point is pulling strings, and you can say, well, automation in this silo will do X, and then what's the wider impact? And actually what that means is that it makes it a lot easier to phase a deployment and to ramp it up. You don't need to go big bang. If you've looked at that, you can focus and zoom in on, it could be picking, but it could be picking just e-com, just retail. It could be just doing a small part. It could be one floor rather than 5, whatever it might be. If you've really mapped it out, then looking at orchestration of everything rather than just automate this one process is always going to be a better way forward. And then we've said it is designing for variability rather than a specific design point. So if you can bake in almost that contingency, it's almost what's the worst that could happen? What's the worst case here, and what will happen? How do we handle that? With us at Locus, we're always then saying, okay, so in this instant, we could have the uplift of capacity. Robots will take this amount of time. If this goes down, what's the fallback? And you pull out all of those then contingencies. It then provides one. It's not the cyber attack example. There are some things that, unfortunately, if everything shuts down, there's not much you can do. But as much as possible, if you can say, hey, we planned for this, and we know, good or bad, we know what to do now. Things will carry on. We can send that message to our customers. Again, it just makes things a lot less stressful. It de-risks it slightly, and it means that when an opportunity comes as well, you're actually much more able to react. You can scale up a lot quicker, and you're not missing that potential new customer opportunity. Something's happening in the world, and you want to be able to jump on it from your marketing and sales teams and saying, hey, the World Cup's coming up. Let's do something special. And you say we can't because we can't actually get product out quick enough. If you've planned for it within your automation, then your business and your revenue will increase as well.
Mm-hmm. And then, John, to sort of throw that over to you with a slightly different twist again, what are the mistakes that people make, common mistakes? I mean, you must have seen them all, right? When it comes to sort of taking the first steps in the automation journey.
I think, like I said before, is diving headfirst into something that you don't understand. Whether it's an automation implementation, whether it's a warehouse management system implementation, there's plenty of different bits in between. It's always it's a mixture of funny and concerning to see people see that it goes, let's say, badly. An implementation of a 5, 10, 20, 50 million pound investment is not going to be simple. It's just how controlled can you make it? So we've had all sorts of someone missed the scope of some racking, someone hadn't had functionality within the certain specification of software, and it's just down to planning and being realistic. So a lot of times where it's fallen down has been trying to build a business case around something that is a perfect use case, or is a unrealistic pick rate or unrealistic amount of stock that you're going to store in a certain amount of space. I think you'd have to ask yourself, would you rather get the investment over the line and have a disaster of a business case at the end of the day, or take a little bit more time, invest in something a little bit smaller that has a longer return on investment, but is actually realistic? So I remember there was a use case 5-6 years ago where we were selling a system that was promising to pick 550 order lines an hour per person. And, for anyone in the industry, you go, wow, that's super fast. Right? It's incredibly fast, but it's achievable under certain circumstances. Is it achievable for every single person across an operation 24/7? Probably not. But the business case hinged on that rate. If it dropped 10, 20 order lines an hour, the business case starts to crumble. And that's exactly where I would say is try and be realistic. Push yourself, but let's try and be brave, but at least be realistic for the business case, because then at least you don't feel like you've got surprises later when you're achieving a little bit below what you anticipated.
Steve, I'm going to ask you two things here. One involves a crystal ball to look forward, but I'm also going to give you the benefit of hindsight first. So have you taken a few wrong turns over the years when it's come to automation? Have there been some times when you thought, if we'd have done that a little different, or if we hadn't gone up that path? Is that just the nature of automating?
I think it is, and I always take the 80-20 rule. Really, if we can get 80% plus correct, there'll always be some bits that don't quite work out, and normally they don't work out because of not of the automation, but perhaps maybe the box sizes have changed. The customers come up with some additional box sizes that don't fit. So you can always normally make that 80 into 90 plus. But it all comes back to that first bit that John touched on very early on in this webinar, is really the process, the products you're handling, how you're going to manage the exceptions in the process, because there's always going to be something that doesn't fit within the automation. And I think if you do that, you'll always hit 80-90% of what you've invested in.
And I always, whenever I speak to a logistician, specifically one working in the fashion sector, you always look quite slightly browbeaten or slightly challenged when you talk about it. It is a challenging area of the business, but is there a silver bullet that's going to come along and help you? How optimistic are you that you can help remove some of these things that keep you awake at night currently?
I am optimistic. Things. If I look back when we started on this journey at Noatum 7-8 years ago, how things have improved, how it's benefited the workforce. They're not doing their 20,000 steps by lunchtime every day. We haven't got them walking around warehouses that they're effectively just getting on with the picking and packing element. So I think there's more to come. I think the days where we got robots running around the warehouse actually picking boxes and picking orders, it's probably not quite there. But yeah, you have the solutions there with shuttles and order pickers now picking things in and out of boxes. So yeah, it will advance rapidly over the next 5 to 10 years.
And Kane, you're as a provider of technology to the industry, as a consultant of, as a partner, technological partner to your customers, you have to try and stay ahead of the curve, try and anticipate those forthcoming trends. How much of a challenge is that? And what have you got up your sleeve for for the next few years?
Yeah, it's really interesting. If you listen to any of the leadership within Locus, right up to our CEO Rick, we'll say that we have to be looking minimum 3 to 5 years ahead with designing, okay, what's the technology that's going to be available, and then designing that for a process rather than just building a robot and then saying, hey, we've made something, where can we actually put it? So we again, Locus Array that we've released recently, that's been in the pipeline for a long time. We're seeing it now, and it looks like, hey, we've just developed this new solution that can remove 90% of labor and fully autonomously pick and replenish. But this is something that we saw 5 years ago. Equally, right now we're looking at what's the next S curve. What's the technology that will be available in 5 years, and what's the process that's going to support. And a lot of it is, we have this two ends, and customers will have the same thing. If when you're looking at automation, do you go for the biggest bang, or do you go for the easiest and the lowest hanging fruit? And which is the one to focus on. So to that point, should we look at picking, because that's 60% of the process, but then we've designed picking that fits within this criteria in this industry. So do we then focus on moving that along to then more niche industries and more niche products? So for example, we've got a robotic arm. We've acquired recently a company called Nexera. We've got a very special gripper technology in terms of a membrane, which enables us to pick a whole magnitude of SKUs, which has been a real blocker within that specific use case in terms of actually getting something that can grab a variety of SKUs. So that opens up a new angle there from picking. But then also, we look at our customers and we'll say to Steve, hey, what do you need, right? What's next? What's your biggest pain point? What's the biggest opportunity? And then design against that as much as possible. And that is just going to be a continual thing as technology advances so much quicker. And then we need to find, okay, how do we make it work? How do we deploy it successfully, quickly, make sure that the ROI is predictable, repeatable? And that's the fun, it's the challenge, but it's the fun bit as well. Is looking at, you could do anything with a warehouse if you put your mind to it, but at the end of the day, it is still products being stored that needs to be picked and sent out. And there is a line probably where the blue sky thinking just wouldn't make sense, because you'd spend so much money doing something to automate it. So it's being realistic as well, and that's the fun bit.
And John, to conclude, as we reach the end of this webinar, you sit across all the technology in your role. Where's the excitement ahead lying for you, and what are the challenges that exist that you hope can still be solved over the next, say 2 to 5 years? Pick a number there.
Yeah, I mean, so there's been a couple of focus areas that people have struggled with in recent times. So I'd say we touched a little bit upon the robotic piece picking, for example. Mm-hmm. Robotic piece picking has been around for years and years and years, in different forms and different maturities, and it's always on the cusp. It's always just about to be solved. And someone's, I think, asked a question in the chat about the advancements of gripping technology.
Yeah, really exciting area.
So it's another cycle where people go from the gripper is the thing that's going to be the next thing that's going to fix it, to then the brain's going to be the next thing that's going to fix it, and then it keeps swapping between them. I think because of AI.
You're saying whack-a-mole here?
Potentially. So that's always an area where once you can get it right, it makes a huge difference. In reality, I think it's still a little bit time away. But I think one thing I wanted to mention, which Kane just touched on there, which kind of links to this, is different industries will benefit from these things in massively different ways. So fashion, for example, very highly automatable, if that's a word, industry. We talk about lights out automation where robots are picking items and there's no one in there. Healthcare, it can potentially benefit from that because it has that consistency in the product types. Whereas, let's say manufacturing, where there's a huge array of different products and sizes and fragilities or whatever it would be, might be a completely different type of technologies. Grocery, the margins are so low, people are struggling to make the business case work. So it's not necessarily that there will be crazy advancements in new tech. It's more just trying to bring the cost down a little bit to make it more available for most industries. Mm-hmm. But then being able to select, let's say, pockets of technologies and bring it together, as Caden said earlier, and orchestrate that. Because way back when, it would be you pick a supplier and you buy something from them and they integrate it and that's what you get. Whereas there's a huge level of collaboration now where you would select different parts of different areas, whether that is software, hardware, or something in between, and bring it together as a holistic solution. And that's where it will have the business case. And that wouldn't have been possible before. So yes, there's a huge advancement in things like AI and technology, but it's more how do you find the best bits and pull them and be able to orchestrate them together. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Mm.
Gentlemen, as we approach the 50-minute mark, I can't believe the time has flown by as it has. So I'm going to just conclude by saying thank you all very much for joining us today. John Bruin of MyBack. Thank you, John.
No worries.
And to Kane Edwards of Locus Robotics. Thanks ever so much, Kane, for being there today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And Steve Hicks, I didn't want to suggest you were browbeaten. I was just generalizing. But I wanted to say, I know, any time of the year when I'm talking to somebody in your sector, I'm aware that I'm pulling you away from one peak or another. So in particular, thanks ever so much, Steve Hicks of No Atom Logistics, for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me today.
And thank you also to our audience for putting this time aside to log into the webinar and for asking those questions. And finally, a big thank you to Locus Robotics for supporting today's event. To access a library of webinars, podcasts, and news, please visit our website at logisticsbusiness.com. Thank you again, and goodbye from all of us.